As I crept closer to our house, a sense of unease took hold of me. I hadn't expected anyone to be home today. Both my husband, Kevin, and I were supposed to be out until late. The sight of multiple pairs of shoes at the entrance, men's and women's, was the first anomaly that caught my eye. It was unlike Kevin to be so careless if he had indeed brought someone home, especially knowing how much I valued our privacy. The voices emerging from the bathroom were loud and carefree, a stark contrast to the typically serene atmosphere of our home. A boisterous, almost vulgar laughter echoed through the hallway, unmistakably male, and distinctly not Kevin's. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I exchanged a worried glance with Kevin, who stood beside me, his face as pale as a ghost. His presence next to me ruled him out of the equation of infidelity, which, though a small comfort, left us with more questions than answers. My name is Taylor, and Kevin and I have been married for 2 years. Our life together has been largely peaceful and full of mutual respect. As a dual-income couple without children, we had more freedom than most. We often spent our days off traveling or simply enjoying each other's company, free from the immediate pressures of parenthood, though both sets of parents lived close enough to maintain a warm, familial bond. Our slightly outdated but majestic rented house was a charm lent to us by our in-laws, who were thrilled at the prospect of family gatherings. We hosted dinner parties about once a month, where the norm was for my mother and me to cook, reveling in the company and the occasional fine wine, while enjoying dishes brought by relatives. This particular day was supposed to follow that pleasant routine. Mom had arrived early to help with the preparations. Yet, something was off. Her usual sunny demeanor was overshadowed by a sullenness that didn't suit her. As we chopped vegetables and stirred pots, she muttered under her breath about the quantities being too much, fearing we wouldn't be able to consume it all, a worry uncharacteristic of her. "Mom, what's wrong?" I finally asked, unable to ignore her unusual behavior any longer. She looked at me, startled by my question, then let out a nervous chuckle and dismissed her earlier comments. But her laughter didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, dear. It's just that Dad has been eating less lately, and I worry," she confessed after a moment of hesitation. This was news to me. My father had always been a robust man, a tireless entrepreneur who hardly ever took a day off. To think of him neglecting his health was troubling. "It's not his health, per se," Mom continued, her voice dropping to a whisper as though the walls themselves might overhear. "He's perfectly healthy, it's just, he's been a bit distant. Critical, even. Complaining about trivial things like how plain my clothes are, or the seasoning in the dinner." Hearing this pained me. My mom was the cornerstone of our family, always managing to keep everyone together, despite their flaws. To hear her spoken to in such a way by my father, who should have been her staunchest supporter, was disheartening. As these thoughts swirled in my mind, Kevin and I stood rooted at the entrance of our home, confronted by the uninvited presence inside and the unexpected familial tensions brewing in the background. The voices in the bathroom, still blissfully ignorant of our arrival, continued to mock the quiet life we had so carefully built. Standing in our garden, I adjusted the placement of the planters while lost in thought about the unexpected developments of the day. The scent of fresh soil mingled with the fragrance of blossoming flowers, creating a serene ambience that contrasted sharply with the tension brewing inside the house. As I pat the dirt around a newly planted marigold, my thoughts were interrupted by Sarah, my mother-in-law. Her approach was quiet, almost hesitant, which was unusual for her typically forthright personality. "Taylor, can I have a moment?" she asked. Her tone was serious, lacking the usual warmth. I nodded and wiped my hands on my apron as I stood up. "Of course, Sarah, what's on your mind?" Without answering immediately, Sarah reached into her bag and produced a small, elegantly wrapped box. It was unexpected, especially today, given the circumstances at home. I took the box from her, noting the logo of a renowned steakhouse etched on the top. Curious, I lifted the lid to find a set of premium steaks, their rich aroma filling the air around us. "Oh, Sarah, these look amazing," I said, trying to mask my surprise. "You didn't have to go to this trouble." She shrugged, her expression still unreadable. "We heard about the celebration for your dad's new business, and I thought this might be fitting. But I didn't realize you'd already planned the same dish. It was true, the kitchen was already filled with the preparations for tonight's dinner, featuring Dad's favorite steak and pie. I couldn't help but smile at the coincidence, but Sarah's next words snapped me back to the present. It's awkward, isn't it? Maybe just serve these steaks today? Kevin, and you can eat right, we're not young anymore, and too much meat can be hard on our stomachs, she remarked, her voice carrying a hint of discomfort, perhaps from the redundancy of her gift. I felt a pang of guilt, realizing that we might have overprepared. I should have mentioned our plans, I responded, slightly flustered. It was thoughtless of me. Sarah waved off my apology, her demeanor softening slightly. It's fine, Taylor. Just a little miscommunication. Let's not let it spoil the evening. She paused, her eyes briefly meeting mine before she carried the box back towards the kitchen. Watching her retreating figure, I reflected on how this simple interaction had exposed a layer of sensitivity we hadn't navigated before. Our family gatherings had always been about joy and laughter, especially when our plans coincidentally overlapped. Yet today, the high-quality steaks, a gesture of love and celebration, had inadvertently stirred a subtle undercurrent of tension. I returned to my gardening, the unease settling like a shadow. Was it just the steaks, or was there more to Sarah's concerns? As I buried my hands in the soil, I decided that perhaps after dinner, I would seek her out for a private chat, to clear the air and ensure no misunderstandings lingered between us. This family, with all its complexities, meant everything to me, and I was determined to keep our bond strong and clear of any discomfort or misgivings. I didn't let the moment linger too long in my thoughts, especially with the dinner party in full swing. Dad was ecstatic about the steak, which came from the high-end restaurant Sarah had chosen. He praised the flavor and the thoughtful gesture, seemingly unaware of the mix-up that had occurred earlier. Mom, always perceptive, caught my eye across the table and gave me a knowing look. She had noticed the situation with the steaks but chose to embrace the moment, delighting in the happiness of my father without bringing up our original plan. As the evening wound down and Sarah, Sean, and Dad left, Mom took charge of the kitchen with her usual grace. She transformed the leftover ingredients we had prepared into a hearty beef stew. It's better this way, she said with a wink. You both would have gotten tired of steak by now. Plus, this way, you can take some home. Grateful for her quick thinking and culinary skills, I packed some of the stew for Kevin and myself, though I felt a twinge of guilt for the unused steaks. The next day, Kevin and I enjoyed the stew, which was even more delicious after the flavors had melded overnight. However, I later heard from Mom that Dad had criticized the stew while eating, calling it outdated. His harsh words stung, and I found myself seething with anger. Yet, in the presence of my mother, who merely offered a resigned smile in response, I held back my frustration, not wanting to cause a scene. A few weeks later, an unexpected change disrupted my routine. Kevin, who was supposed to be on a 3-day business trip, sent me a sudden message informing me that his trip was cancelled due to the client's issues. He would be coming home as usual. This meant altering my plans to stay with my parents, so I quickly sent a message to Mom to let her know I wouldn't be coming. After finishing my shopping, I met up with Kevin, and we headed home together. As we approached our house, a faint light spilled from the entryway. Confused, I murmured, "Did we forget to turn off the lights?" I was certain I had checked everything before we left. Kevin reassured me with a light chuckle, "Don't worry about it." But his mood shifted abruptly as he tried the door. "That's odd. The front door is unlocked." His statement sent a chill down my spine. Had someone broken in? Instinctively, I pulled out my mobile phone and began recording, a silent agreement between us to be cautious. Kevin gave me a nod, and with a deep breath, he slowly pushed the door open. As the door creaked ajar, our eyes immediately fell to the entryway. There, a pair of men's leather shoes and women's pumps lay, neither belonging to us. Kevin frowned. "Whose shoes are these?" The presence of unfamiliar footwear was alarming, especially given that they clearly belonged to someone we didn't know. If these shoes had been Kevin's, and he hadn't been here, it would have been one thing, But this situation was entirely different and far more unsettling. I let out a breath, trying to gather my thoughts amid the tumultuous realization that my father and Sarah were the ones inside. The implications were staggering, not just for our family, but for Kevin's as well. The initial shock made my voice waver as I spoke to Kevin. What do we do now? Kevin, still holding the umbrella as a makeshift weapon, seemed to struggle between anger and disbelief. Should we confront them right now? He asked, his voice tense, reflecting the conflict visible in his eyes. No, I whispered, instinctively feeling that a direct confrontation in the heat of the moment might lead to irreparable damage. Let's step outside for a moment. We need to think this through. We retreated to the porch, the cool evening air a slight relief from the stifling atmosphere inside. The dimly lit street offered a stark contrast to the bright lights and chaotic scenes back in the living room. Here, under the shadow of the night, the weight of the situation began to fully settle on my shoulders. As we sat on the steps, Kevin broke the silence. I'll call Sean. Maybe he should be here when we sort this out. His voice was steadier now, the initial shock giving way to a resolution to address the situation responsibly. I nodded, pulling out my phone to call my mom. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed her number, my mind racing with how to even begin this conversation. Mom, I need you to come over, I started, trying to keep my voice calm. It's about Dad. There's something you need to see. On the other end, Mom's voice was filled with concern. Is everything okay, honey? Did something happen to your father? I paused, unsure how much to reveal over the phone. It's complicated, Mom. Please, just come quickly. Kevin is calling Sean too. Ending the call, I looked over at Kevin, who was just finishing his conversation with Sean. His expression was grim. Sean was surprised. He thought Sarah was visiting her sister today, he relayed, confirming the depth of the deception. Sitting there, waiting in the chill of the evening, the gravity of the situation began to dawn on me. This wasn't just a simple misunderstanding or a one-time mistake. This was an affair that involved deep betrayal within our families. The laughter and love that had defined so many of our gatherings now seemed tainted. The sound of approaching footsteps snapped me out of my reverie. It was Mom and Sean arriving together, confusion and worry etched on their faces. As they approached, I stood up, steeling myself for the confrontation that awaited us. Let's go inside, I said, leading the way back into the house. The muffled sounds from the bathroom were still audible as we entered, a vulgar reminder of the betrayal just beyond the door. As we stood in the living room, the reality of what was about to unfold hung heavy in the air, a pending storm that could change our families forever. I instructed him to give you a call upon his return, as it appeared Dad was at home with Sarah. The reluctance to disclose the bathroom situation seemed to convey enough urgency to Mom. Her voice took on a tremble as she declared, "I'll be right there," before abruptly ending the call. In less than 10 minutes, she materialized at the doorstep, her complexion drained, and Sean, wide-eyed and confused, trailed behind her. Though the cacophony from the bathroom had ceased, its lingering effect still loomed in the hallway, albeit muted by the audible hum of the shower. Fortunately, the unsettling voices that once reverberated through the corridors had now dissipated. "What do you mean Sarah is here, just like I said?" Mom reiterated, her tone laced with palpable concern. "She's out on a day trip with friends and won't return until tonight." Sean, grappling with a myriad of questions, seemed torn between seeking clarity and avoiding the impending revelation. Despite our prior notice regarding Dad's company, Sean remained hesitant to acknowledge the reality, his gaze deliberately diverted from the bathroom's direction. Sensing his distress, Kevin gestured to me, signaling the need to resume recording on my mobile device. Kevin made no attempt to conceal his approach as he barged into the bathroom unceremoniously. "What the heck are you doing in our house?" His forceful entry caused the bathroom door to recoil with a resounding thud. The subsequent eruption of screams, intermingled with escalating shouts between Dad and Kevin, underscored the gravity of the situation. Kevin, his demeanor dripping with disdain, muttered disapprovingly. Hastening to shield myself from the anticipated spectacle, I hastily retrieved a bath towel, flinging it into the bathroom in a bid to avert any inadvertent exposure. However, my attempt to shield my eyes proved futile as Mom, unable to contain her indignation any longer, surged past me, her resolve unyielding. With a primal roar, she seized control of the chaotic scene, forcibly extricating Dad from the confines of the bathroom. Sean, steeling himself for what lay ahead, followed suit, braving the tumult to retrieve Sarah. In a matter of moments, both emerged, hastily cloaked in the remnants of their hastily discarded attire, their disheveled appearance a stark testament to the turmoil within. As we congregated in the hallway, panting heavily, our collective breaths mingling in the dense silence, Mom's voice pierced through the stillness. "Why?" Her inquiry, laden with incredulity, marked the precipice of Dad and Sarah's forthcoming explanations. It was a saga that began with Sarah's infatuation for Dad, entwined with his influential stature within certain illustrious circles. "I might think he was cheating by bringing another woman home, but he's right here next to me. Someone unknown to us was in our house." Sensing my reaction, Kevin grabbed his umbrella, ready to swing it at any moment, and moved forward. Then we saw the living room light was on, and the food that seemed to have been bought scattered on the table. Strange for a burglar, I thought. Then, I heard a voice approaching slowly. It became clear the voice was coming from the bathroom. It seems that the person speaking is inside the bathroom. This voice, I can understand why Kevin is truly creeped out. After all, the voice coming from inside is quite vulgar. It's unsettling and infuriating to think that our home could be used without our knowledge. Wondering who on earth could be doing this, I slowly opened the door, and my eyes immediately fell on some discarded clothing. I couldn't help but let out a sound. There unmistakably were Dad's clothes. The large jacket neatly hung on a hanger was his favorite, he had worn it at the dinner party just the other day. The messily discarded shirt and pants were all too familiar. Mom had just left a few hours ago, so there was no way she could be here. It appeared that Dad was bringing another woman into my home for an affair. The realization made me frown involuntarily. Looking up at Kevin, wondering how to explain this to him, I saw him staring with a ghastly pale face at a necklace resting atop the washing machine. I remembered seeing that necklace and the earrings beside it quite recently. "This can't be Mom," Kevin's words confirmed the identity of the person inside the bathroom. The ones using our home for their affair were my dad and Sarah. I pulled Kevin, who seemed ready to burst in on them, back to the living room. Quietly moving away from the echoing voices seemed to help him regain some composure. "Shouldn't we call your mom and my dad?" Kevin suggested, though he seemed confused. "What would happen if we brought Mom and Sean here now?" I could only foresee a crisis for both families, but I couldn't just ignore what was happening. Vulgar noises were still coming from the bathroom, indicating they might not come out anytime soon. I contacted Mom, and Kevin reached out to Sean. "Right then, it's about Dad," Kevin said. "Your dad, he said he was going golfing today and left early in the morning. He won't be back until tonight. I told him to call you when he gets back. It seems that Dad is at home with Sarah." I couldn't bring myself to mention what was happening in the bathroom, but that was enough for Mom to understand the gravity of the situation. In a frightening tone, she said, "I'll be right there," and hung up. Less than 10 minutes later, Mom arrived with a pale face, and Sean looked utterly bewildered. The voices had stopped, but they were still inside the bathroom. The sound of the shower was audible, but thankfully, the voices that had filled the hallway earlier were no longer heard. "Kevin, what do you mean Sarah is here, like I said earlier?" Mom continued, "She went on a day trip with friends and won't be back until tonight." Sean, full of questions. We had informed him that Dad was with someone, but whether he was confused or unwilling to accept it, he avoided looking towards the bathroom. Feeling sorry for Sean, Kevin signaled to me, and I started recording on my mobile phone again. Kevin made no effort to conceal his approach as he charged into the bathroom. "Hey, what the heck are you doing in our house?" The bathroom door hit hard by Kevin made a dull sound. Screams from Dad and Sarah were followed by the escalating shouts between Dad and Kevin. Kevin, having forced the door open, grumbled with a tone filled with disgust. I grabbed a bath towel and tossed it into the bathroom, wanting to avoid seeing their nudity at all costs. I didn't want to see them naked. Mom, apparently unable to hold back any longer, pushed past me and stormed into the bathroom. She shoved Kevin and Sarah aside, and with a roar unlike anything I had heard from her before, she forcibly dragged Dad out of the bathroom. Sean, having finally steeled himself, followed Mom into the bathroom and pulled Sarah out. Then both of them hastily dressed in their hastily discarded clothes, sitting in the hallway with their hair still damp. In just a matter of minutes, all of us, myself included, were panting heavily, our shoulders rising and falling with each breath. Mom's thin voice broke the silence. Why? Her question marked the beginning of Dad and Sarah's explanations. He's stylish and sophisticated. Sarah reportedly fell for Dad from the moment they met, captivated by his demeanor. Their relationship started to develop during the family meetings organized for mine and Kevin's wedding. Sarah, trying to portray herself as a good woman, eagerly took charge of organizing the dinner parties, gradually becoming closer to Dad. At one of these dinner parties, she finally gathered the courage to confess her feelings. At this point, Kevin, looking nauseous, glared at Sarah. But the problem also involved Dad. He was drawn to Sarah, who adorned herself with bold makeup and flashy clothes, exuding a feminine allure over Mom, who diligently looked after the home. However, both Dad and Sarah had their own families. Mom often worked at the same company as Dad, and on Dad's days off, Sean usually had a similar schedule. Therefore, they needed a place to meet discreetly. Surprisingly, they chose our home. Kevin and I, having a hobby of taking short trips and staying at hotels even if they were nearby during long weekends, inadvertently provided them with the opportunity. At that point, Sarah said, "It's not safe to leave the house, so I'll check on it." She would say this to confirm our absence and then contact Dad. Since we were neighbors and shared our plans without any suspicion, our house was unknowingly made available for their use. We never gave them a spare key, thinking it impossible for them to enter. But it seems they secretly took the key during one of the dinner parties and made a copy. Moreover, they were careful to leave no trace of their presence in our house. They brought their own food, took all the trash with them, collected any hairs from the drain after using the bathroom, and wiped down any moisture before leaving. This time, Dad contacted Sarah after finding out that I was going back to my parents' house because of Kevin's business trip. I had only informed Mom about the change in plans, leading to this unexpected encounter. If it hadn't been discovered now, it's hard to tell how long we would have been deceived. Naturally, both were served with divorce papers by their respective partners, faced claims for compensation in the divorce proceedings, and were disowned by Kevin and me. Although Dad and Sarah admitted to their actions initially, they started claiming we were lying and had no evidence. I had recorded everything on my mobile phone, and presenting that as evidence, the divorce proceedings went smoothly with lawyers involved. We used the settlement money to move into an apartment. Kevin, who was a bit of a germaphobe, developed a complete aversion to the bathroom from that day, refusing to even go near it. I too found it painful to continue living in a house that had been used for their affair, so I was fully in agreement with moving. Now, Mom, having lost all affection for Dad, lives with the two of us. After the divorce was finalized, Sarah seemed quite pleased. She became brazenly defiant, perhaps due to Dad's influence, and accepted the divorce settlement and compensation without much resistance. She moved in with Dad right after the divorce, and they got married, fulfilling their desire to be together. It seemed like a perfect outcome for them, with Sarah becoming the wife of a company president, looking forward to a great life ahead. However, their plans went awry. Dad's new business venture failed, and the company's performance rapidly deteriorated like a balloon being deflated. Mom, upon hearing this, simply nodded, as if to say it was to be expected. Who do you think was covering for Dad all this time? Indeed, it was Mom who had been diligently managing the complaints about Dad's forceful business tactics, both inside and outside the company, quietly supporting the business. She handled a major part of the company's accounting and dealt with clients. Naturally, she resigned from the company at the same time as the divorce, and Dad, far from opposing this, was eager to get rid of her, leading to an inadequate handover. As a result, the company was left with employees dissatisfied with Dad, and many followed Mom's lead and resigned, leading to a shortage of staff. Dad had always thought that supporting him was a wife's duty, so he naturally expected Sarah to take over. However, Sarah, who had always been a housewife, had no understanding of the business and proved to be of no help at all. The exodus of employees, fueled by the president's divorce scandal, became widespread gossip, leading clients to withdraw from Dad's company one after another, citing poor performance. Dad's company couldn't survive even half a year and soon went bankrupt. Their house and assets were seized and burdened with significant debt, including unpaid wages. The two managed to find refuge in a cheap apartment, living a meager existence. Dad, despite his age and wishing for a company that would treat him as a president, couldn't secure a new job. Naturally, his unemployment persisted, and he resorted to gambling as a means of stress relief. Not satisfied with just that, none of this would have happened if it weren't for the affair. It was Sarah who seduced me. In his rage, he began to resort to violence towards Sarah. Sarah, trying to make ends meet with part-time jobs and desperately supporting Dad, grew disillusioned with him as he sank deeper into gambling addiction and squandered even their living expenses. Unable to bear Dad's repeated verbal abuse, one day she fled the apartment. She ended up at C's house. It was the house where Kevin had grown up. Kevin and I happened to be visiting Sean, who had become somewhat reclusive due to the emotional toll of the divorce, and we often checked in on him without ringing the doorbell. Finding the front door open, we went to see who it was and were met by Sarah. Initially, we didn't recognize her. She looked so different that we thought a stranger, an old woman, was speaking to us. The once beautifully made-up Sarah was nowhere to be seen. Exhausted, Sarah attempted to apologize and seek forgiveness for her past actions, but I could only respond with a bitter expression, thinking it was too convenient. Sean must have been quite shocked, yet it seemed he was somewhat swayed by the return of the woman he once loved. While he was pondering how to ask her to leave, Kevin, who was standing next to him, suddenly clutched his mouth and crouched down on the ground. Remembering Sarah's affair in the bathroom, he couldn't hold back and vomited right there. In a panic, Sean and I rushed to bring a trash can and water and ended up hearing Kevin's cries of rejection towards Sarah from behind his back. Feeling sorry for Kevin and wondering how to resolve the situation, it was Sean who stood up to take action. Sean looked Sarah squarely in the eyes and unequivocally denied any possibility of reconciliation, firmly asking her to leave. Sarah seemed deeply affected by her own son's vehement rejection, enough to make him physically ill. Without a word, she staggered to the front door and left. Since that incident, Sarah has apparently kept her distance from Sean. There has been no contact from Dad or Sarah since then, so it's safe to assume that our ties with them have been completely severed. Kevin was under the weather for a few days, but has since recovered. Together, we're committed to building a warm and loving home. Mom has shown incredible resilience, quickly finding work, making new friends, and moving on from Dad to enjoy her life. She's planning to rent an apartment for herself once she's saved enough, and I'm hoping she'll choose one close to our home. As for Sean, he seems to have perked up a bit after adopting a stray cat that wandered into his yard. Taking in one cat has apparently led to more cats gathering at his place, and now it's known in the neighborhood as a popular hangout for cats. The ordeal caused by Dad and Sarah involved the whole family in a tumultuous situation. However, those of us who remain have strengthened our bonds and are doing our best to move forward. My name is Alyssa, a 36-year-old housewife juggling part-time work and raising 2 children. While I'm generally content with my day-to-day life, my husband Jackson, a corporate employee of the same age, often prioritizes his mother Shannon over our family plans. Plans for family outings are frequently altered to accommodate Shannon's requests, such as weeding her garden or accompanying her on shopping trips, even if it means canceling visits to my parents' home. Jackson has even gone as far as changing our child's birthday cake from their chosen character theme to a fruit tart recommended by Shannon under the guise of it being healthier. Mom says kids need to eat lots of fruit and get their nutrients, he'd say. His disregard for our children's disappointment leads to frequent confrontations between us. Shannon, for her part, seems to relish Jackson's prioritization of her, deriving a sense of superiority from it, even if it comes at the expense of her grandchildren. Sorry about that, kids, it's Grandma's fault, she'd say, yet her apologies are delivered with a smile. Moreover, Shannon's condescending attitude towards me, coupled with external praise of her as a wonderful mother-in-law, strains our relationship further. Since the passing of my father-in-law, Jackson has indulged Shannon even more, exacerbating her behavior. With our 10th wedding anniversary approaching, I suggested we do something special. Hey, since it's our 10th anniversary this year, how about we go out for a meal at a restaurant? We could ask Shannon or my parents to watch the kids, I proposed. Has it been 10 years already? Jackson exclaimed. Sounds good, let's look for a nice place. What was that restaurant that was featured on TV? We decided to book a reservation at an upscale restaurant we wouldn't normally visit. Jackson was enthusiastic and quickly called Shannon to ask her to watch the kids, even though it was still nearly 2 months away. I was looking forward to a special anniversary celebration. On the anniversary day, I was entertaining the kids while eagerly anticipating the evening. Jackson, who said he would come straight home after work, hadn't returned. Perhaps he suddenly had to work overtime, but I spoke to him this morning, and he shouldn't have forgotten that it was today. These thoughts had been circling in my mind for a while now. After all, there had been no reply from Jackson despite my attempts to contact him, leaving me completely in the dark about the situation on his end. Moreover, I couldn't get in touch with Shannon, who was supposed to look after the children, making it difficult to wait for Jackson at the restaurant as planned. As a last resort, I called Jackson's office. Upon requesting to speak with Jackson, I was informed that he had finished work and already left. I thanked them politely and hung up, wondering why he hadn't responded to my messages if he was already done with work. All I could do now was wait. My daughters, who were aware of tonight's plans, started glancing at the clock, expressing concern about how late it was getting. Indeed, I replied, truly unable to take my eyes off the ticking clock hands. Even if he had left for work just before I called, he should have been home by now since he drove to work this morning. I continued waiting for Jackson until just before the reservation time, but I couldn't wait any longer. The reservation was for 7 p.m., and it was nearly time. I decided to call the restaurant to inform them of our delay. Hello, your party has already been seated, the host said. Alone? No, as per your reservation, there are 2 guests. Can you tell me who came? A man who appears to be a company employee and an older woman, the host replied. Excuse me, but may I ask who's calling? Upon hearing that, I quickly ended the call, saying it's a misunderstanding on my part. I'm sorry, and hung up in a rush. An older woman, could it be? I immediately called Jackson. After several rings, he finally picked up. Yeah, what is it? You've been nagging me. Where are you? You're not already at the restaurant, are you? I am. We're already seated. Mom insisted on dining here, so I decided to have dinner with her tonight. We can celebrate our anniversary at a local restaurant this weekend. You like the pizza there, right? It was indeed Shannon. The audacity of Shannon to join an anniversary dinner knowing full well what it was, and Jackson's actions in not only allowing this but also taking my place without any communication filled me with disgust, not just anger. Especially knowing that I had been looking forward to this for 2 months, and his idea of making it up to me was a meal at a local restaurant. It was a clear indication of the absolute preference Jackson had for Shannon over me. The kids will be disappointed. They have Grandma's cooking, so make them something they like tonight. I'm counting on you, Jackson said. Wait a second, I tried to stop Jackson as he was about to hang up. Our parents gave us gifts for our 10th anniversary, you know. They said they wanted to hear all about our dinner. Gifts? Your parents always give me stuff I don't like. Just throw away anything that's not cash, Jackson responded, suggesting to discard gifts filled with everyone's well wishes, which was appalling to me. I gave him one last chance, almost as a gesture of mercy. Alright, but you might regret this later. You sure it's okay to throw them away? Jackson seemed puzzled by my insinuation, but his stance appeared unchanged. Regret what? I just need the cash. Oh, the food's here, so I'm hanging up. Don't call me again, alright? Bye, he concluded abruptly. I sighed as I hung up the phone, noticing the worried looks from my children. It was getting a bit late, but who wants to help me with dinner? Their eager hands lifted my spirits slightly. After dinner, I did as Jackson had said, sorting through the anniversary gifts. I kept the cash and prepared to discard the rest, feeling ashamed and sorry for those who had given them to us. It's astonishing that I've managed to stay with Jackson for 10 years. After finishing up and putting the kids to bed, Jackson finally came home. Don't you think it's terrible to prioritize Shannon even on our special 10th anniversary day? It was my invitation, and you knew I was looking forward to it. You could have had dinner with Shannon any other day, I confronted him. Yeah, don't sulk. I said I'd take you to the local restaurant next time, right? I'll even pay for half of it, Jackson responded dismissively. It's not just about that. You said we didn't need the gifts everyone prepared for us, because it's our anniversary. You're being persistent. I have work tomorrow, can you just let me sleep? Jackson completely ignored the issue and went straight to bed after his shower. The next morning, thinking it was my last chance, I tried to talk to Jackson about yesterday's events. Hey, about the celebration gifts, I began, but Jackson, visibly annoyed, ignored me and left the living room, then went off to work without saying anything. Still angry from yesterday, I decided there was nothing more I could do. After seeing the children off to school, I received several calls from Jackson within just 3 hours. Thinking he was calling earlier than expected, I answered the phone to hear Jackson speaking in a rushed manner. Hey, those celebration gifts you mentioned yesterday, who gave them to us? What do you mean? From my parents, friends, and your boss, Mr. Jones. Even the company president gave us something, I replied. You never mentioned that. I did. I said there were gifts from our parents. You should have made that clearer. Mr. Jones and the company president have been close to my dad for years, and our families have been acquainted since I was a child. They've always treated me like family, and yesterday evening, they even made a special trip to our house to deliver their gifts. The watch the president picked out was really nice, and the wine Mr. Jones brought looked delicious. But it doesn't matter now, does it? You said to throw away anything that wasn't cash, so I did. What have you done, Alyssa? Do you realize what you've caused? Jackson was furious, but I wondered on what grounds he had to complain. I asked you if you were sure, and I tried to talk to you about it last night and again this morning, but you ignored me every time, Jackson. Don't shift the blame. It's your fault for not listening, I retorted before hanging up the phone. Jackson tried calling back several times, but I ignored all his calls. I might seem petty, but I couldn't contain my anger any longer. When Jackson came home, his footsteps were so loud I could hear him from the entrance. Enough already. Give me the gifts we received now, he demanded. Faced with Jackson demanding the return of the celebration gift, I informed him, I threw them out with this morning's trash, so they've already been collected. There's no way to get them back now. Jackson's anger reached a level I had never seen before. He shoved me and stomped on the floor. That's just unbelievable. Can't you differentiate between right and wrong, Alyssa? What's truly unbelievable is knowing it's our anniversary dinner and still going to the restaurant with Shannon and telling me to throw away gifts without even looking at them is just insensitive, I replied firmly. I lashed back at Jackson as he continued to shout amidst the heated argument. Jackson kept insisting that I was the one at fault. Just say you threw it away and apologize to them. I've already told everyone at work that, so there's nothing we can do now, he argued, his reasoning infuriating me further. Oh, is that so? Then I'd like them to come here so I can apologize directly, I countered. Jackson's face showed sheer panic as the door to the next room opened, revealing Mr. Jones and the company president. Dumbfounded, Jackson could only watch as they listened to my side of the story. After hearing from me, they found Jackson's behavior out of character and called for an explanation. I explained everything, and concerned that a misunderstanding had arisen between us due to their celebratory gift, Jackson and I agreed to discuss the matter further. I invited them over to our home, deciding it would be best to let Jackson calm down before we talked. As Jackson trembled slightly and apologized to Mr. Jones and the president, he must have realized there was no way to deny or evade the truth. His anger gone, he now seemed remorseful. However, it was too late. I declared my intentions boldly. I wanted a divorce. Leaving the house, I felt sorry for involving the two of them in such a scene, but I knew it was the right decision. Leaving the children with their grandparents, I announced my intentions boldly. As news of the divorce spread throughout the company, Jackson faced various rumors. Despite some resistance leading up to the divorce, after the separation, he paid child support and met with the children once a month. However, his attempts to emotionally manipulate the children into living together again only led to their resistance. Recalling Jackson's reaction still made me laugh. After making the divorce declaration, I apologized to the president and Mr. Jones, returning the celebratory gift I had kept hidden from Jackson. Mr. Jones even presented me with a divorce celebration gift, showing his support. After the divorce was finalized and things settled down, the children and I were invited to a home party at the president's house. There, I was offered a job at the company run by the president's brother. Now, supported by many people and working in a job understanding of parenting,